Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. Pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
We're sitting down with Michael Scheuer. He was the chief of the CIA Bin Laden unit.
Washington's enemy is an enemy that doesn't exist. We're fighting an Islamic enemy that Washington believes is out to kill us because we have elections, because we're free, because we have women in the workplace. It's an enemy that doesn't exist. It didn't exist when bin Laden was alive. It doesn't exist now. America is being attacked because of its foreign policy in the Muslim world, because of its support for Israel, because of its support for the Saudi police state, because of its presence on the Arab Peninsula. The real problem is the leaders of the Jewish American community in the United States who influence and corrupt our Congress. What they've done is create anarchy. They've created a situation where the only beneficiaries are the Islamists. The guns that have flown out of Egypt, out of Tunisia, out of Libya to the Islamists have been enormous in their volume. And the prisons that were opened in Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya have reinforced the Islamist groups across the world. So their mindless pursuit of secular democracy at the end of the day endangers the stability of the region and probably the whole world. I don't know what the thinking is, except that they have come down on the belief that democracy is better for everybody. And the truth is, American and Western foreign policy interests in the Middle East have depended for 50 years on the maintenance of tyranny. So I think what we're seeing is a slow, almost inexorable advance toward some kind of a conflict with Iran. The plot that was described by the Attorney General of the United States is a comic opera. Very strong Islamist presence in Libya. So the idea that somehow there's democracy afoot in Libya is just simply wrong. It can become a country that's decidedly anti-American, anti-NATO. It can be probably less a hotbed of terror than a country that is vastly unstable.
It seems the U.S. is almost creating grounds for terrorists to surge and then goes out fighting them. We see it in Pakistan. They got the whole nation alienated because of the strikes. A lot of people want revenge. How efficient is that?
We are very efficient in this day and age in the last 20 years in creating enemies. We're not very efficient in creating security for the United States. We have the best educated population in the world, and we have the people with the littlest amount of common sense. How many times have we heard Mr. Clinton, Mr. Bush, Mr. Obama say, this has nothing to do with religion, this is not a religious war, this is a bunch of people who are just madmen. We are definitely fighting a religious war. And until we come to realize that, we are never going to be able to defeat it. In fact, we're encouraging the growth of a new generation of people who are going to fight us. It just demonstrates again the ignorance of the United States government in terms of its political leadership about what our problem is in the Muslim world. The key point of formation for Al-Qaeda was the presence of U.S. military forces on the Arabian Peninsula. 15 years after they declared war on us, we're now going to take people out of Iraq and put them in Kuwait and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, reinforcing our presence on the Arab Peninsula, only going to cause us more foes and more enemies in the Islamic world.
If the U.S. pulls out of everywhere,
yes,
is it going to be the end of terrorism?
It certainly would deny the terrorists the glue of unity that keeps them focused on the United States. Let the Chinese deal with these people for the next 50 years. We've had enough of it. But I think the point is the Americans can't get out. We're dependent on the Saudis to maintain our interests in the world oil market, and the Saudis buy, next to the Chinese, more of our debt than anyone else. So as long as we're side by side with the Saudis and with the Israelis, we're stuck in the Middle East, and America will continue to bleed.
Okay, so we have a couple things to say about that. That person says he's an ex-CIA agent. And he says that we're fighting a religious war. And that's something that 8 years ago I might have seen that and believed it. Now I see it and I'm like, who does this guy think he's fooling? Of course, he's fooling almost everyone. You're not fighting a religious war. And in fact, I would challenge you to name one single Muslim terrorist who came to your country and attacked you. Can you do it? Name one of them that came to your country and attacked you. That wasn't your government. That wasn't set up, framed, entrapped by your government. And if you think you know one, you better start doing a Google search and find out the truth about them. Because the underwear bomber was staged. The shoe bomber, Richard Reed, have you heard anything from him? If he was a legitimate terrorist, why don't you hear quotes from the shoe bomber saying, I want to destroy America? You don't hear that, do you? Of course, Osama bin Laden was never in this country after he was a so-called terrorist. He was here going to college and stuff. And you can just go on down the list. You have to quote somebody who was in one of the debates. No important enemies or relevant enemies. As far as terrorism goes, it's a myth. And you heard that woman right there pegged it. She said, well, go into all these countries, aren't you just creating unrest and churning up new terrorists that'll want to fight you in the future? Now, of course, I'm heavily medicated. I don't remember what she said, but that's my paraphrasing. She basically said, you're creating terrorists. And that is how the New World Order operates. This is one thing that people have to understand. They need an enemy. They must have an enemy because that's how they control you at home. You know, I have my brother, he has this little Ernie thing. I guess it's a Tickle Me Ernie or whatever the crap that stuff is. Tickle Me Elmo. And for whatever his son, who's like 3, is like afraid of it. So this little 3-year-old boy is afraid to Tickle Me Elmo. So what do the parents do when they want the boy to do something and the boy doesn't want to do it? They say, you better put your shirt on or Ernie's going to get you. I think I hear Ernie coming. That's what your government's doing to you. You better go through the full body scanner or the terrorists are going to get us. You better pull over at these checkpoints or the Muslims are going to get you. You better give up your rights. I think I hear Elmo coming. Now, if anybody thinks I'm being glib right now, I am not. This is literally what they're doing to you as a population, as a people, as a nation. They're treating you like a 3-year-old child afraid of the boogeyman. That's what they're doing to you, and it's working. It's working. Because too many people are afraid to speak out. And I challenge you again, name a single Muslim terrorist who has attacked America in the last 20 years. Who's legitimately attacked America. Who wasn't paid by the FBI. Entrapped by the FBI. Who didn't do something that gave the government an excuse to take away your rights. It's so obvious. Just think back. You used to just get on an airplane. Then 9/11 happened. And then, oh, we got to check people real careful. Then the shoe bomber. Oh, we're going to check people real careful and take off your shoes. Then there was some BS about an underwear bomber. Staged again. Just Google it. Underwear bomber staged right now. Open a new tab. It's not rocket science. Underwear bomber staged. And then what happened? It's not enough to be wanded and searched and take off your shoes. Now you got to go through the full body scanner. And why? Depopulation. They're giving you cancer. Better go through the full body scanner. I think I hear Elmo coming. It's that sick. It is that sick. And everybody's falling for it. Now, personally, I will not fly. My brother-in-law wants me to go to Ireland with him sometime. And we're about an hour further into the broadcast here. So I'm assuming he's up in the air now and he can't call us. We're 10 years down the road from 9/11, 10 years more advanced technology, and he cannot reach us with his cell phone from inside that airplane. What does that tell you about all them calls that came from inside the airplane on 9/11 that would broadcast across the mainstream media? Where somebody would say, "Hi, Mom, it's me," and then say their first and last name. Doesn't work, does it? I don't see him calling me. And you know the phones work because I just took a caller. The silence that you hear right now is proof of what they did on 9/11. I don't know how long it takes to get to Ireland. He'll call me when he gets there. And he'll say he tried to call me while he was in the air and he couldn't do it. It's inevitable. So as the world turns, the evidence mounts. And I've already heard that it's impossible to make a phone call from altitude. But now we have proof positive. I told my brother-in-law, when you get to altitude, call me. He can't do it. Now this hour, we're not concentrating on anything in particular. I better make sure the video is still rolling. This is the New World Order news here at Death to the New World Order. And I will talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about if they call in. The number is 330-333-5140. You'll see it on the business card every 15 minutes. 330-333-5140. I'm a pretty nice guy, but I'm not going to tolerate BS. So, I mean, don't think you're going to call in here and pull a Peter Greenall. I won't tolerate that. Now, this CIA gets on here, and this is another thing. I've been, somebody said they didn't let me play an RT, Russia Today, the news. And this is somebody who doesn't understand he's being lied to 24/7 by the American mainstream media. The reason I play Russia Today is because the Russian news will say things about America that America won't say. And that's why I will use them as a source on a fairly regular basis. I'm sure there's probably things Russia Today won't say. But they'll say more than America does. And we have to take it wherever we can get it. So that's why I play Russia Today. It's not because I'm a communist. Don't be ridiculous. Again, that CIA guy was talking about these things as if there is an actual war with Muslims. And if there is, it's because we attacked them. And we attacked them by and when we attacked ourselves. That was the attack upon them. thinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
In a Polish town, at the break of dawn, is heard a scream, a clamor and a moan. People half crazy stirring about. Suddenly a call, hey Joe, get out. Ukrainians militia full of police to murder the Jews. This gives them peace. There's fear and there's panic, they slaughter and maim. They're taking the Jews off to the train. No pen can write how it feels, the sound, the motion of the wheels. Cars packed, body strain. Jews riding to their death in God's name. To Treblinka, to Treblinka.
That's a good deal on that gun right there. All right, folks, the topic is obviously the history of gun control, which, if you noticed in that video, is rather bleak. And there's a really good video on YouTube showing these genocides that have occurred throughout history, many of them specifically because the people allowed themselves to be disarmed. And again, evil operates by your choice and consent. If you choose to register your weapon, and any sovereign will tell you a register is a transfer of ownership. If you choose to register your weapon, you are giving it to the government, and you're telling them where it is at so they can come and get it when the time comes. You do not register your weapon. It's just not a good idea. Gun control is something that is obviously getting worse and worse. And people think, well, we still have our guns, so it's all okay. In other words, you can have just about any kind of gun you want, but can you? This mostly depends on where you live. In, for instance, New York City, you can't have any gun. Nothing. And in various states, it varies. And even in states where you can have guns, you can't have it in certain cities. So largely it's a municipal thing. As governments become more and more centralized, the gun bans will become more and more widespread. It is very important for people to have at least one gun, and I recommend 3 as a minimum. A handgun, a long-distance rifle, and a machine gun. I would recommend an AK, that's your machine gun, a Glock, that's your handgun, very reliable, never jams, and the long-distance rifle is open to preference. A lot of people have different preferences. But everybody should have at least one gun. What would have happened if the Jews had guns before they were rounded up and put in the ghettos? Or after they were rounded up and put in the ghettos? Obviously, they would have defended their lives, wouldn't they? But having a large armed population is very, very important for the protection of your rights. There's a lot of people who just can't imagine themselves having a gun. It's almost like a dog. If your parents didn't have a dog when you grew up, and so you never had a dog when you were a child, and now you have a house, and you're like, well, I don't want to get fur on anything. If I had a dog, there'd probably be dog fur in the house. And so you never get a dog. That's fine. That's a matter of preference. You understand? But gun ownership is not a matter of preference. It's a matter of life and death on the individual basis, and it's a matter of national security. In that if you have a weapon and others have weapons, you're securing the freedom for the future of your nation. You know, there was some Japanese admiral. I'm not gonna say it was Yamamoto because I don't know. But he said, you know, after attacking Pearl Harbor, they wanted to invade the mainland. He said, no, we can't do that. Are you crazy? There will be a gun behind every blade of grass. You want to know why the American people haven't been rounded up yet and put into FEMA camps? Because there would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Now, since it came up, FEMA camps, I don't listen to, I think his name is Rivera. Is it Mike Rivera? I don't know. But he seems to run a decent show, and he seems to be accurate with what little I've seen. And he has brought up that he thinks the FEMA camps are all a big distraction. I would tend to agree with him. I've thought that for quite some time, and I've stated several times they don't need FEMA camps because people are already imprisoning themselves inside their own homes. You understand? And it's kind of funny because last night my wife watched something on YouTube here on TV because we can do that. We cut the cable. And if you want to know how to do that, go to YouTube and put in D2NWO and then put in HDTV. D2NWO HDTV. I did a broadcast and I demoed a product that will allow you to cut the cable and have the internet on your television. But getting back to what I was talking about, my wife was watching something on raw food. It was called Simply Raw. It was an hour-and-a-half long documentary on the benefits of eating raw food. And I'm struggling here to remember why I'm talking about this. We were on gun control. What the hell happened? Let me have a sip. So we were talking about gun control. And then everything went to shit. This was important too. FEMA camps. Yes, people being imprisoned in their own homes, and they are. And we were watching this documentary called Simply Raw on the benefits of having a raw food diet. And it was basically about these people who went to a remote location to try and recover from their diabetes. And they were going to recover from their diabetes by going onto a raw food diet. And raw food doesn't mean raw meat. It means it's pretty much a vegetarian diet. It's almost completely a vegetarian diet. But it means no fast food, no steak, no, cooked lasagna. I mean, all the things you think of when you think of food, you can't have them. And so these people go out there, and of course some are fatter than others. Because, I mean, that's what diabetes is for the most part. You gain weight, you become unhealthy, and you become diabetic because I'm going to try not to offend anybody out there, so I'll just stop right there. As somebody who does work out and struggle to stay in shape, because I believe one day this is going to come down to a physical war, I have a little bit of an irritation with people who decide they're going to sit around, get fat, eat potato chips, and just not even know what's going on in the world. And sometimes I lash out verbally. I'll try to control that, as if any of you fat slobs are ever going to get off the couch and be worth. I'll put it this way: I'd rather fight alone than fight with most of the people that are around today. Because one of them fat fucks is going to step on a stick, and then they're going to find you. Anyway, so these diabetics go out to this remote location to get on the raw food diet to try and recover from their pitiful diabetic states. And within like 3 days, this fat woman is like, I gotta go home. I miss my family. Just making up all kinds of bullshit excuses to go home. And I told my wife, I'm sorry, I'm cursing a little bit today, but it is what it is. I said, that bitch just misses her refrigerator. She don't miss her husband. She don't miss her son. She don't miss her dog. She don't miss her house. All she misses is her refrigerator. And I was exactly right, because then the next thing you know, the other people start talking to her. She calls her husband, and she's on the cell phone with him. She's like, I'm just so hungry. I'm just so hungry. What kind of pitiful excuse for a human being is that? They were serving him plenty of food. Well, anyway, long story short, she stayed. She recovered from her diabetes, got off insulin, and, happy ending. Pretty much everybody that got on the raw food diet, actually everybody who got on the raw food diet for 30 days completely recovered from their diabetes except for one guy. And that's because he was sneaking out and drinking alcohol. So he did that to himself. And I've done a broadcast on the raw food diet. I think that come January 2nd, I'm going to go on to the raw food diet. Now, I say I'm going to go on to it because I want to. I'm willing to. And I'll do it. Except for one thing. I don't have time to make food. So that's a pretty big problem with the whole plan right there. And, I've ordered books, quick recipes, all that kind of crap. We'll get back to it. Of course, I'll probably forget, so. You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Which of these stories will you be talking about tomorrow? 1,400 cops evict 400 protesters from Occupy LA.
The people, united, will never be defeated.
The city's mayor smugly congratulates himself.
In my life, I've never seen a more professional, restrained police force under very, very trying circumstances as I witnessed today.
Other than beating the protesters who were running away and sending a guy to the pavement for taking a photo and keeping the media at bay, Philadelphia also raided overnight.
I got trampled by the horse and knocked me over.
And also featuring a smug, self-congratulating mayor.
This morning's action, as I mentioned earlier, was based on weeks of planning, a plan that was flawlessly executed by a combination of a variety of forces.
Plus pepper spray as Occupy Phoenix tries to break up the conservative legislation writers at the ALEC meeting there, and branding protesters with invisible ink in Montreal. At least one mayor is admitting what's going on. Michael Bloomberg speaking at MIT. I have my own army in the NYPD, which is the 7th biggest army in the world. Indefinite detention of American citizens. The Senate is hell-bent for it, as are 16 Democratic senators. The White House intends to veto.
Congress is essentially authorizing the indefinite imprisonment of American citizens without charge or trial.
UnitedTruthSeekers.com and eternally.
Very, very trying circumstances as I witnessed today.
Other than beating the protesters who were running away and sending a guy to the pavement for taking a photo and keeping the media at bay, Philadelphia also raided overnight.
I got trampled by the horse and knocked me over.
And also featuring a smug, self-congratulating mayor.
This morning's action, as I mentioned earlier, was based on weeks of planning, a plan that was flawlessly executed by a combination of a variety of forces.
Plus pepper spray as Occupy Phoenix tries to break up the conservative legislation writers at the ALEC meeting there, and branding protesters with invisible ink in Montreal. At least one mayor is admitting what's going on. Michael Bloomberg speaking at MIT. I have my own army in the NYPD, which is the 7th biggest army in the world. Indefinite detention of American citizens. The Senate is hell-bent for it, as are 16 Democratic senators. The White House intends to veto.
Congress is essentially authorizing the indefinite imprisonment of American citizens without charge or trial.
Good evening from New York. This is Wednesday, November 30th, 342 days until the 2012 presidential election. Two major Occupy camps closed overnight, Occupy Los Angeles and Occupy Philadelphia, while Boston's mayor moves to have a temporary restraining order removed to allow police to close the camp there at Dewey Square. And Phoenix police used pepper spray against the Occupy protesters marching against one of the Koch brothers' favorite charities. The fifth story on the countdown, unrelenting official pressure continuing on the Occupy movement. But mass arrests have not stopped a mass movement that seems to draw strength from each setback. We start tonight in Los Angeles, where some 1,400 police came swarming into City Hall Park after midnight. This after Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa had ordered the park officially closed on Monday. LA officials say around half the protesters had already left, leaving perhaps 250 tents still occupied. Police officers with guns equipped with rubber bullets among the forces assigned to clear them out. As many as 300 out of the remaining 400 protesters were arrested. For most, the charges were minor, failure to disperse. At least 4 protesters and a dog were taken down from a treehouse after officers fired rounds from a beanbag gun. And at least one photographer found himself wrestled to the ground and in handcuffs after he failed to move quickly enough for police. Mayor Villaraigosa had nothing but praise for the LAPD.
In my life, I've never seen a more professional, restrained police force under very, very trying circumstances as I witnessed today.
Evidently, the mayor doesn't get out much. He later added to the praise, saying the LAPD was able to avoid violent confrontations, and this may be the finest moment in LAPD history. What, out of all 6 good ones? Adding it was necessary to do this to protect the children living at Occupy LA. Los Angeles, he failed to mention, has an estimated 13,000 homeless children. Some Occupy LA protesters ventured to disagree with Mr. Mayor's self-congratulation.
It was a military action. It was anything but peaceful. They swept us out like cattle.
Protesters also complained they had been told police would allow them to collect their tents. Many of the tents went into dumpsters instead. And while some protesters found a temporary home at Our Lady Queen of Angels Church, they have been asked to pack up and leave there tonight. In Philadelphia, police striking out at about 1 a.m. to clear the camp at Dilworth Plaza, next to City Hall there. Police there making at least 50 arrests. Mayor Michael Nutter, who once showed up overnight to commiserate with the protesters, insisting the area needed to be cleared so a construction project could get underway, putting as many as 1,000 people to work. And like his counterpart in Los Angeles, he praised his police.
The city of Philadelphia has acted with restraint, with patience, and respect for the First Amendment rights of those who wish to protest and any others.
First Amendment rights, perhaps not the first thing on the minds of the police in Phoenix today, using pepper spray twice on half a dozen protesters marching against the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, the group that helped shape conservative legislation and has reportedly received more than $1 million from the Koch brothers. Despite their use of massive police force, Mayors Villaraigosa of LA and Nutter of Philadelphia insist their administration's performance was different than what we've seen in other cities facing Occupy protests. Certainly fewer casualties than we saw in Oakland or New York. New York, a city whose mayor, Michael Bloomberg, boasted to an audience at MIT last night, quote, "I have my own army in the NYPD, which is the 7th biggest army in the world. I have my own State Department." He could have added, "I also have a serious case of megalomania." Elsewhere in the Occupy movement, Occupy Boston facing legal pressure from its mayor there, Tom Menino, who filed papers today to have a restraining order removed that would allow Boston to remove the camp at Dewey Square at a time of the mayor's choosing. In London, England, tens of thousands marched while as many as 2 million public sector workers struck over pension cuts, triggering this sympathy march by some 200 U.S. nurses at the British Embassy in Washington. And in Canada, an Occupy Montreal protester, at least one, many, in fact, say they were branded by police with an ultraviolet dye after arrests last Friday. Protester Nina Hayes claiming that she was told the mark was meant to identify her. You see it there, the number 2 on each hand, in case she tried to return to the protest at Victoria Square, and complaining the ink won't wash off despite police claims to the contrary, and that it is a very terrible feeling that they put a substance in my body without my consent and then later lied about it. The scarlet number. Let's start with Los Angeles and what happened with Occupy there last night. I'm joined now by PJ Davenport, a protester with Occupy Los Angeles. Thanks for your time tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Where were you when it started? What did you see?
I was standing on the west side of the park on the south lawn, and all of a sudden I saw fellow protesters running towards me, and I looked back on behind me, and the same thing was happening from other directions. I looked beyond the fellow protesters, and there were probably about 150 to 200 officers with their rifles, tear gas rifles up, running towards them. And so everybody was on the move, and those of us who remained in the park just sort of sat down and took a place, and those of us who were going to go behind media lines chose to do so at that time.
The mayor insists the raid might have been the finest hour in the history of the LAPD. I've already made the joke that there's not much to compare it to, but in practical terms, he said the violence was minimal and everybody's rights were respected. What do you think of that? What do you think of his assessment of that?
It was certainly relatively peaceful. I mean, we were very peaceful in our actions. It was an overwhelming show of police might, is what it was. We literally, without warning, were descended upon from all directions. They poured out of buildings. They came from side streets, and within 15 seconds, there was a sea of black surrounding all the protesters. Was it peaceful? Yes. Only the most wild person would have resisted something like that. It was absolute might that descended upon us. I think that LAPD has been peaceful compared to certainly to the other protesters across the police across the nation. But was this about respecting First Amendment rights? I think not.
Was it about problems that required hazmat suits, workers wearing hazmat suits who came in and cleaned things up and talked about risks of staph and other infections? I mean, was there some sort of bubonic plague we hadn't been told about at Occupy LA?
No, there was no plague. They did, you know, we talked a lot about the grass at Occupy LA over the last several weeks. When you are down at the occupation, you look up and you see City Hall on one side of you, you see the LAPD across the street, and then you see the LA Times. We call it the trifecta. You know, I think that they're very well situated down there together to work in tandem and say whatever it is that, you know, they want to say and what they want mainstream press to know. But we question why there were DNA swabs made last night. We'd like to know very much, and we still really haven't gotten an answer on that, nor do we have an answer on why we have 92 people sitting in jail right now with $5,000 bond set. So there's a lot of things that we're really in question about, and we look forward to having our people released and getting some really sincere answers from City Hall.
Well, at least there's this a century ago, the publisher of the LA Times used to drive around Los Angeles about circa 1910 with a machine gun on the roof of his car looking for members of unions. So at least the LA Times has improved slightly in the last 100 years. Last question, what happens with Occupy LA from here on in? Is there another physical location, or what happens if there's not another physical location?
Well, what's happening at 7:30 tonight is we're holding our GEA on the West Side Stairs. So we have a 4 p.m. march starting at Pershing Square, candlelight vigil. We have people coming down tonight. The occupation goes on. You know what happens when they do this? When they shake us down like this, our numbers multiply. So we're still in effect, and we've got a lot of work to do. We're dedicated to doing it, and we're not going anywhere until that work's done.
P.J. Davenport of Occupy Los Angeles, a great thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keith.
All right, what you just saw there was nothing short of an infomercial advertising the Occupy movement and recruiting. That's all that was. They shut them down so they could play the publicity across the mainstream media so they could get others to go. When is the last time the mainstream media covered anything that happened with a legitimate movement? The Tea Party was ignored forever until they were right up in the face of the politicians. Is the Occupy movement in the face of any politicians? No. They're just out there on the street in tents. But the mainstream media has covered it like it's some kind of big deal. And it's clearly and obviously designed to bolster the numbers in the Occupy movement. Now, I got to say at this point, knowing the Occupy movement is New World Order controlled opposition, they are in the process of getting Senate Bill 1867 passed. Well, Senate Bill 1867 is passed. I guess it's in the Congress. And if that's what the Occupy movement is for, then they are achieving their goal, aren't they? But the timing of it, it don't matter how hard you try to recruit, you're not going to have people out there in 4 feet of snow or 2 feet of snow. It's just not going to happen. And maybe in LA, not in New York, not in DC. It's not going to happen. Not in Cleveland. So, you know, people have been saying from the beginning, how could they have timed this right up against winter? Why did they time this right up against winter? I'll answer that question right now. They knew the date they were going to propose the legislation, the date it was going to be voted on, the date it would pass. They timed it so they could build up an occupation enough to get this bill passed and let the winter shut it down. This occupation exists as justification, as grounds for the legislation to force them through. That's all they need it for. And that's why they timed it right up against winter. Now, I have a bit of a programming note here coming up right after this broadcast, which ends at 8 p.m. Carrie Lee will be interviewing Kevin Annett And he is the creator of Unrepentant, a documentary exposing the atrocities against the First Nations people in Canada. So what they're going to be talking about is the atrocities that were committed against the natives. We've, heard of the mass graves found up there, I guess behind Catholic churches and stuff, Catholic schools. And I haven't looked into this personally, but I did try to put a cat on a leash once. And this is the picture that comes to my mind. Cats don't like leashes. You can put a dog on a leash. And that's like the difference between a European and an Indian, a native. You can put a dog on a leash and the dog will be like, well, damn, I'm on a leash. I guess I won't go more than 5 feet away. Sometimes if they're ornery, they'll pull on you a little bit, but they understand there's a leash there. I'm going to pause this. If you put a cat on a leash, it will go ballistic. It will fly 5 feet up in the air. It'll perform more karate moves than you've ever seen in your life. It will strangle and kill itself because it's wild. And I guess this might be the kind of situation they were dealing with when they were trying to take these natives and teach them to read and write and all this kind of stuff, and they just wouldn't take to it because they were like trying to put a cat on a leash. And I guess there was some killings going on or something. I don't know. Anyway, that will be coming up with Carrie Lee in about 1 hour at 8 p.m. here on freethinkradio.com. You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Know good and well that someday there could be a government in power that is shipping its citizens off for disagreements. There are laws on the books now that characterize who might be a terrorist. Someone missing fingers on their hands is a suspect, according to the Department of Justice. Someone who has guns, someone who has ammunition that is weatherproofed, someone who has more than 7 days of food in their house can be considered a potential terrorist. If you are suspected by these activities, do you want to have the government have the ability to send you to Guantanamo Bay for indefinite detention? A suspect. We're not talking about someone who has been tried and found guilty. We're talking about someone suspected of activities. But some of the things that make you suspicious of terrorism are having food, having more than 7 days of food, missing fingers on your hand, having ammunition, having weatherproofed ammunition, having several guns at your house. Is that enough? Are you willing to sacrifice your freedom for liberty? I would argue that we should strike these detainee provisions from this bill because we are giving up our liberty. We are giving up the constitutional right to have due process before we're sent to a prison. This is very important. I think this is a constitutional liberty we should not look at and blithely sign away to the executive power or to the military. So I would call for support of the amendment that will strike the provisions on keeping detainees indefinitely, particularly the fact that we could now for the first time send American citizens to prisons abroad. I think that is a grave danger to our constitutional liberty, and I advise a vote to strike these provisions from the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back my time.
Big government Republicans and Democrats were busy shredding the last vestiges of the Constitution. Senators John McCain and Carl Levin want to enact a law that would declare the entire United States of America a battlefield for the military. They're talking about inserting the Army into domestic law enforcement. Senator Lindsey Graham, who supports this bill, says, quote, "The homeland is part of the battlefield, and people can be held without trial, whether an American citizen or not." Guess he hasn't read the Constitution recently. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us now. Colonel McGregor, as always, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge.
I must tell you, I was utterly appalled when I saw this legislation proposed. We didn't learn about it until last night because the committee hearings on it were done in secret, even though the Constitution requires the Congress to do these things in public. And there were no actual hearings, just a bunch of members of the Senate who got together and wrote this thing. And it basically says the president can arrest whoever he wants anywhere in the United States of America and keep them without charging them with a crime, without letting them see a lawyer, without bringing them to a judge for as long as he wants. How is that consistent with the Constitution?
Well, Judge, you're the legal expert, but whenever you suspend due process, which in effect suspends the rule of law, you walk down a very dangerous path and you give authority to your government that it can then wield essentially without restraint. What worries me is that we'll end up creating categories of people who are then subject to arbitrary arrest. And that's dangerous because we don't know how those categories will be defined or interpreted in the future. All in all, it's a disaster and it's something that should be defeated.
One day the President of the United States, whomever he or she might be, might say, okay, let's arrest that guy.
Suppose the President decided that one of his political opponents was an enemy of the state. He could make that person disappear. Sounds fanciful, sounds crazy, but it's true.
Okay, so there you have them talking about Senate Bill 1867, which did pass, and you saw Rand Paul trying to force through an amendment that would have struck that from the bill, but that amendment failed. Senate Bill 1867 passed 93-7. Some may be saying, well, that's kind of old news. Maybe they're underestimating the importance of this. As we sit between the time it passed in the Senate and the time the president signs it and makes it into law, there's nothing more important. And I'm telling you this as somebody who's probably towards the top of the list of people to be rounded up and detained indefinitely. And you don't want to tune in to Death to the New World Order and find out, well, the website's gone. The live stream's gone. The radio station's gone. So what you want to do is, there's nothing, look, let's just face it, there's nothing we can do. They're not going to listen to us, and they don't care what we have to say. We are edging closer and closer to a cataclysmic confrontation that is inevitable. Unless the American sheeple becomes so passive that the confrontation never takes place. And I suppose that's possible if they can do things so incrementally that there's never that massive shock to the silent masses. Even though this should be one of many giant shocks to the silent masses, the ignorant sheeple, it's not, because they don't even know about it, and this is where entertainment comes in. They don't know about Senate Bill 1867 because they're watching TV. They got to see what's on American Idol. They got to watch football. If we could just get people off of the internet, off of television, if we could just get people unplugged from television, that would be the biggest giant leap forward for the truth movement and for the freedom of humanity. But we can't get them unplugged. We just can't get them unplugged. Work on it 24/7. That should be your mission in life. Get people unplugged. You're listening to Hardcore Harry, and I am Death to the New World Order, streaming to you live at freethinkradio.com, unitedtruthseekers.com, and eternally at d2nwo.com.
Just a few of us from the beginning. Just a few of just a few of us, a mission heaven sent. Now there's a few of us building new tomorrow. There's a few of us lend a helping hand. There's still a few of us pray for those in sorrow. Still a few of us want to save this land. Faith is strong enough to move
folks. We'll be back in one moment.